for the event this evening. Each candidate is going to be given 3 minutes to make an opening statement. They don't have to take the whole 3 minutes if they don't want to. You'll probably appreciate it if they don't. But they have up to 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Then we're going to move into the question and answer segment. We have a number of questions that have been pre-prepared that I'll be asking as the moderator. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to respond to every question. So we'll start on with Michelle and we'll move down the line. Each candidate's going to get 1 minute to respond. Then we'll come back down and give each candidate another 30 seconds to follow up on that question if they choose to. That'll be optional. Maybe they heard something that one of the other candidates said that they feel like they need to respond to. Maybe there was something about their own answer that they want to clarify. So they'll each get another 30 seconds if they want to take it. I'll have the liberty of asking a follow-up question for all the candidates or even specifically one of the individual candidates if I believe there's clarification that needs to be provided. We will rotate the order in which the candidates respond. So Michelle will respond first to the first question, and then it'll be Chris to the second question, and then Mike to the third question, and then we'll come back to the beginning so that everybody has an opportunity to go first and last on many of these questions. At the end of that question and answer session, and this is where I think it gets really interesting, at the end of that question and answer session, each candidate is going to be given the opportunity to ask their opponent a specific question of their choosing. The opponent will have 1 minute to respond. The candidate asking that question will then be given an opportunity to challenge that answer or to ask for clarification. And this is where we start to see some intermingling, some actual give and take between the candidates, which I think could be very helpful and beneficial in trying to determine their qualifications for office. But whatever that follow-up question is, or the challenge, or the request for clarification, it has to remain on the topic of their original question. The follow-up and the answer must be brief. If time allows, at the end of all that, we'll be happy to take some questions from the audience. I think John has spread out some index cards throughout the audience. If you have a question that didn't get asked, that you would like to have asked, please write it down on an index card and just hold it up in the air, and CJ will come around and pick up those index cards and bring them up, and we'll ask them at the end, if time allows. Obviously, we don't want to keep you here all night. Let's see. And then at the end, each candidate will be given 1 minute to make a closing statement. So, without any further ado, I'm sure that's clear as mud for everyone. We're going to go into the actual forum itself and ask. We'll give Michelle the opportunity to give her opening statement. Should be comfortable. Oh, wait, there's one.
I can use two. Here, thank you, Chris. I have some notes. First of all, thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to each of you and share the floor with some incredible leaders here. My name is Michelle Salzman, and I am a candidate for Florida House District 1. I am a community leader, an Army veteran, a small business owner, I'm a mother and a wife. I am a Christian, and most importantly, I am an effective conservative. We're at a crossroads for our nation at a moment when I would have never imagined us to be, when conversations about defunding our police are not only taking place, but they're actually being considered. It is imperative that we have leaders in office who will fight with our president for your safety. My opponent has had almost 7 years to prove his allegiance to our safety, our police, and our firemen, but because he has proven to be an ineffective ally, they've chosen to endorse me. They have fundraised and contributed to my campaign because they know I will be a powerful voice for our police, our firefighters, and for our safety. I have proven to be a very effective leader of our community. I have a great working relationship with many of our local leaders as well as elected officials. I'm a lifelong resident of District 1, and I know firsthand the many issues that we face and have been facing for a long time. I am confident that I can represent the communities of Northwest Florida in a way that will get results. In just the past 2 years alone, Escambia County has sent $500 million of tax revenue to Tallahassee. Our current representative has brought back zero. Zero of your tax dollars. And this past session, he didn't even ask for any back. As your representative, I will fight for every penny, and I will come home empty-handed. I'll be effective. I am endorsed by the Police Association, as well as the Firefighters Association and the Florida Medical Association. I am pro-life. I am the only candidate in District 1 with an A rating from the NRA, and I need your votes. You're welcome to check out my website at votesalzman.com. That's vote, SALZMAN.com. You can also check me out on Facebook, or you can call me. My cell phone number is 850-207-5024. I encourage each of you to reach out. Thank you.
Christos, that's fine. You want to pass it? Yeah, go ahead. Hi. Hello, I'm Chris Dosa. I live in East Tip. My wife and I moved down here back in 2009. But you know, people will say, well, you're not from around here. Let me tell you what. If you earned your wings of gold from the cradle of naval aviation, you were a son and a daughter of Pensacola. And that's what I did back in 1986. So, with that said, my wife and I have been married now for 34 years. We've raised 8 children. 2 of those sons are currently now working on active duty. One of them just came back from Okinawa after spending 2 years there. We've got a house full of conservative Republican children. And I think I got at least 5 votes coming out of my home. Okay. And Pensacola means an awful lot to me. When I came through here at flight school, I can just tell you from that moment, I was courting my wife at that time, and my memories of Pensacola since then have been always fond. Yeah, I love this town. I can't imagine living anywhere else. I'm concerned about the people in Pensacola, and I'm concerned about our community. I've done those things that I think were in the best interest of our community, to include championing the cause of naming the new bridge over Pensacola Bay after our hometown hero, Chevy James. I think that was a big, big deal, and I think it's going to make a huge impact to our community. And I was very proud to have done that, and with the help of Mike Hill right here, we got it done, and the governor signed that into law on June 30. In spite of all the resistance, we got it done. I know how to get things done. I'm a real estate developer, and I was born and raised in Chicago, and I did my development in Chicago. And let me tell you, it's not easy to do that there. I think I may have been the only Republican developer in the entire city, but I got my projects done. And I will tell you this, I'm a constitutional conservative, I'm pro-life. I don't have a problem letting people know whether or not they're doing the things they should be doing and holding them accountable. I tried to do this most recently when I tried to shut down the abortion clinic right up the street here at Hobby Lobby, enforcing the governor's executive orders that he failed himself to enforce. I had no problem doing it. And I think we made some national attention, brought national attention to that. And let me tell you, it's an important issue to me. I'm pro-gun. And folks, I want to let you know I'm very proud of the endorsement I received from John Stenberg from the Florida Family Action folks, because they recognize my leadership, they recognize my commitment, and they recognize my commitment to God and country. Thank you.
Okay, how do I stop? Oh, there we go.
I finished. I'm conservative, constitutionalist, your state representative, Mike Hill. I know what it means to be a conservative. I'm going to share with you in just a little bit what being a conservative means. But first I want to share with you that I understand that in order for me to occupy this seat, 2 things had to take place. Number 1, I had to get more votes than my other opponent. Number 2, I had to say that oath of office that I do solemnly swear to support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and its government, and that of the state of Florida, and that I am duly qualified to perform the duties of the seat which I am about to enter. So help me God.
Amen.
Now, when I say said that oath, it wasn't just between me and the official administering that oath. It wasn't just between me and my constituents, even though they're all included. That oath was between me and the living God. I was promising God that I will support, protect, and defend this document. It was a document that I said an oath to upon graduating from the Air Force Academy, and each time that I was promoted, I repeated that oath, and then when I got elected to office for the first time in 2013, I said a very similar oath. That oath is dear to my heart. This Constitution is dear to my heart. And my actions when I'm in office reflect my oath to that Constitution. Now, inextricably tied to the Constitution is our Declaration of Independence. You can't separate the two. Which you will understand or recognize one of the opening statements of the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator. Notice how many times they reference and give allegiance to God. Endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. The very next sentence is critical. And to secure these rights, government is instituted among men, governing by the consent of the governed. The reason I am there is to secure these God-given rights. The very first one is life. So what did I do? I filed legislation, the heartbeat bill, protecting life. It says once a heartbeat is detected in the womb, that baby cannot be aborted. Liberty, our freedom, our Second Amendment that we have. I filed legislation to repeal the unconstitutional red flag laws which were implemented after the Parkland shooting.
Amen.
I do what I said I'm going to do. Fulfill my assignment of that oath to office. I might kill. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the candidates. I think it's obvious from their opening statement that tonight's going to be a good evening. We've got three very capable candidates this evening. So now we're going to move into the question and answer session. And the first question, and we'll start down here with Michelle. Here's the question. The only thing that the legislature is actually required to do under the Florida Constitution during the legislative session each year is to pass a balanced budget. Nothing else is required. That's required constitutionally. Our state budget has grown considerably for the past several years and is now higher than it has ever been. Tax revenues are projected to plummet significantly as a result of the economic devastation wrought by the economic lockdowns associated with the coronavirus pandemic. What will your approach be to balancing the state budget? Will it be tax increases? Will it be budget cuts? Will it be a combination of the two? And what programs will be on the chopping block in order to achieve this balanced budget? Michelle, you're up first. You have 1 minute. And by the way, everyone, shout out to our timekeeper, Bill Fetke, who's right down here. He's going to be working hard the entire time.
I'm already sweating.
Michelle, you're up.
Thank you. Well, we are fortunate to live in a state that does have a balanced budget, so no matter what, we will come out equal, even. The most important thing for me in this platform, the whole reason why I filed to run for office, is I saw that the governmental basics were being ignored by our locals, by our state level representative, as well as in Tallahassee. Safety, infrastructure, and at the state level is education. Those are the priorities for me. Those are the things that I want to see funded. All of the other things, all of the extras, are honestly not significant enough to me to stay in the budget. So the first thing that I would look at are all of the extras that we have. Thank you, Bill. He's awesome. But again, just to remind you, safety, infrastructure, and education will never be on my chopping block. Thank you.
Timer ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Ready on you.
I think that I would not entertain any tax increases. It would strictly be budget cuts. We currently have a budget of $92 billion. It's a real number, $92 billion. The governor just recently scratched off, vetoed $1 billion. I think that we will have to determine our budget based on the revenues we collect. I don't intend to support any tax increases whatsoever. The first place I would cut would probably be any kind of support for higher education. I'm sick and tired of having these kids brought, after 12 years of being educated by their parents in local area schools, to universities and turned into our little communists. Okay? Enough of that. Those guys can figure it out on their own. There's a lot of smart people at those universities. We don't need to be supporting them. They're not going to be turning out productive citizens.
If there's one thing that drives me crazy, when I go to Tallahassee each year, and I've been there a number of times, is to see that budget creep. Each year, it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats in office, each year that budget tends to go up, and it goes up based on the revenue that comes in. My question is, why do we have to spend every penny that we collect? They set some aside over in reserve, but they could set a whole lot more in reserves. When I first got elected, one of the first things I said I was gonna do, and we did, I passed legislation that would cut the cost of when you go to renew your license plate or get it new in half. That was my bill, was signed into law. It was $400 million. The largest tax cut in Florida's history at that time. That's bringing money back to the district. It's giving it to every person's pocket right there. I would not ever vote for a tax increase. I've seen the budget, and I've seen all the fat that's in there, and those who try to make it their priority to bring some of that fat home. I say stop sending the fat over there.
All right, now each candidate gets an extra 30 seconds. Go on.
My opponent isn't here, but I think he's fully for raising taxes. Touche.
Shut up. You want your extra 30 seconds?
Not to put words in his mouth, but I'm just saying.
I actually promised back there that I would pretend to be Alex and say just a couple of comments, so every now and then I might give Chris somebody to talk to, but that's it.
Chris, another 30 if you want.
Another 30? I'll take 30.
Yeah. Mike's an experienced politician.
Call me a statesman. So, if you want to talk about bringing money back to the district, the Chappie James Bridge, which I sponsored that legislation to name it after Chappie James, $400 million. I was in office and voted for that budget to bring that here. The construction you see going on 9 Mile Road, right? Isn't that okay? Yeah. Tens of millions of dollars. I voted for that budget to bring it back here. Giving our teachers a pay increase to where they are within a top 5 of all teachers in the U.S. I co-sponsored that bill and voted for it. So you talk about bringing money back to the district, it's happened time and time again.
Okay. All right, next question. And this is something that we're all dealing with right now. Florida Statute 252 establishes the governor's powers to issue executive orders in the event of an emergency. And of course, we all know that he's been doing that in response to the coronavirus quote-unquote pandemic. Some Floridians think he's gone too far, some think he hasn't gone far enough. What is your opinion of this statute as it's currently written? Is it too broad or not broad enough? What is the legislature's role in that process, according to that statute? And what changes, if any, to this statute would you like to see enacted during the coming legislative session? And we're going to start this time with Chris.
I read that statute. It's a terrible statute. What it says is that in times of an emergency, natural disaster, or an invasion, then the governor is given executive or given the power to issue executive orders. And it says those are to last for 30 days in the very next sentence, unless it is extended. So, I've already talked about this. What I want to do are two things. First of all, amend that statute such that the threshold for him calling or using his executive order is more clearly defined and it is harder to reach. And then secondly, if you're going to extend it beyond that 30 days, we must have legislative approval. That he just can't extend it on. Okay, I'm not pointing fingers at Governor DeSantis at all. What I'm saying is, it's too much power given to one person, and imagine where we would be if Gillum had been governor. We'd be looking like New York, California, and Michigan. No, we have to rein that power.
Thank you, Mike. Chris?
I concur with Mike with regards to oversight over the legislation or that particular law. But what troubles me is when the governor in fact has the ability to issue an executive order, if you don't enforce it, what's the use of having the authority? In this case, he issued 2 executive orders. One, that people from Louisiana were not to enter into the state without being quarantined for 14 days. And the second one was that non-essential, he shut down everything. Everything. People could not go to church. Okay? Not even go to church. And remember this, please never forget it. But we allowed the conduct of abortions on Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Holy Easter. While none of us could worship freely, we did not have our First Amendment rights. We allowed as a society the conduct of abortions right here in our backyard, and the governor had the authority to shut it down.
I agree with Chris. The biggest concern that I had with the shutdown was the picking and choosing of who was open and who was not open, and we're still facing that today. I think it's really concerning exactly what Chris said, when we pick what we can and can't open. We can't have churches open, but we can have riots, we can have assemblies in the streets, and it's very concerning to me because all of the citizens that comply with these laws are the law-abiding citizens, and the ones that don't are the ones getting out there and breaking the law.
Amen.
I also don't agree that Walmart was safe and Lowe's was safe, but my local small businesses were not. My local church was not. I think that we definitely need to reevaluate the oversight. Thank you.
Okay, each candidate is entitled to an extra 30 seconds if they want it. Mike, you want another 30 seconds? Chris? No? Michelle? No? Okay, so Mike kind of jumped the order, so Chris gets to go first this time. All right. So here's the question.
My opponent, me, I'm sorry.
Okay, exactly. So here's the question. How would you define, oh, well, wait a minute. Okay, I get the right to ask a follow-up question. I think I'm gonna do that on this question. This is really important. Mike made reference to the legislature's role, or the role they should have. The statute does currently provide that the governor gets to issue the executive order, but the legislature can override it. They've just never done that. Should there be a requirement, a hard and fast requirement, that they be required to come into session, to convene a special session if they're not already in session, for the purpose of addressing whether or not this executive order should be extended or should be overridden outright? Yes, you mean? Sure.
In times of emergency, I mean, so you can almost categorize this pandemic and or say civil unrest, I would think it would be a requirement. You would have to call them back into session. Again, it's time of pandemic, time of civil unrest. I would categorize those items specifically. Yes.
Michelle, do you have a response for that?
Sure. I think that when you issue a requirement, then it might be easier for the legislator or the legislative body to actually convene, because a lot of times people are so worried about what leadership will think if they challenge something. So if there was a requirement, it might take some of that undue burden off of the body as a whole. And I have to caveat that with who's going to pay for that, because every time we create something, we have to find where the money's going to come from. I think it's a great idea, but we certainly would have to find where that money would come from.
Okay. Mike?
I would say as the statute is written right now, there's only 3 occasions where he can use that executive order and in case of emergency. And those are well defined. By the way, a pandemic is not one of them. It's not there. Now, that oversight should be done, but to have a special session according to our statute right now, it can only be called if the Senate President, Speaker of the House, or the Governor calls it, or if a vast majority, a supermajority of the House legislators request it. So it's not easy to call us back into session, which is a good thing. Because I've been over in Tallahassee. When you have 120 House members and 60 Senate members over there, 40 Senate members over there, that's a recipe for disaster. The less we're over there, the better. But again, I would like to write legislation that says if he's going to extend or abuse that power, then legislation should be allowed to either overrule it or to go and address that issue.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. Chris will begin with this one. How would you define corporate welfare? And are there any examples that you can cite that are contained in the state budget?
I can't cite specific examples of the state budget. I haven't studied that carefully enough, but I can tell you what one of them is. Triumph Gulf Coast is my opinion as corporate welfare. In fact, it's so egregious that I think that the entire board needs to resign or be dismissed and replaced. As an example, we're providing $65 million to the country of Singapore, in addition to another somewhat of $160 million from the state to do what? Why not an American company? I mean, this is one prime example of corporate welfare. They just shut down the Apalachicola oyster beds. And what is Triumph Gulf Coast doing? Assigning $8 million to them. For what purpose? You know, again, it's not so much corporate welfare, but it's cronyism. It's fundamentally cronyism. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, it's not a matter of going to Tallahassee and just wanting to fulfill, you know, fill more bills and pass more laws. You need to send people there that are firewalls, that stop bad legislation and bad expenditures. That's what we really need in Tallahassee.
I can give you a couple of examples of capital cronyism. One is Visit Florida. Visit Florida is an entity where they are giving your taxpayer dollars, your money, and what they're supposed to do is market Florida. And for some reason, they think that because they put an ad in a magazine or an ad on TV in Chicago, that's going to bring people to Florida. People are going to come to Florida anyway because of our beaches, because of the food, because of Disney. They're going to come. And I'm proof of that because when my wife and I lived in Montgomery, Alabama, every 3-day weekend, we came down here. And I never read anything from Visit Florida. That's one of them. Another one is Enterprise Florida Initiative, which would use your taxpayer money to try and entice businesses from outside the state to come in here and compete with businesses that are already here. We need to stop that kind of nonsense. That should not be anywhere in our budget.
All right, Michelle?
Well, my most important component is safety, infrastructure, education. One thing I would be looking at are the no-bid contracts that we have with the state, but I just want to reiterate how important it is that we just get back to the basics. If we stop focusing on sea turtles and other sensational news, then I think that we'd be doing a better job as Florida and as America. The most important thing that we could be doing is focusing on our family and our own family values in our own home, and stop worrying about what our neighbor is doing, and stop worrying about what type of nonprofits that we can fund and where we can put our money. Safety, infrastructure, and education.
Okay, so just as a follow-up question then, we didn't actually get a definition of what corporate welfare is. We cited some examples, but how would you actually define corporate welfare? Mike?
Corporate welfare is when they take taxpayers' dollars, our money, our hard-earned money that you get up and go to work for, and it's supposed to be for feeding your family and providing for your household. They take money from you and they give it to established corporations, established businesses, who are, I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar corporations that they are giving your taxpayer dollars to either give them tax breaks or to give them incentives to hire more people, when instead it should be focused on that business should make a profit. If they can't make a profit in a free market, bye, somebody else will.
Good. Chris or Michelle?
Corporate welfare, my definition, simple is that lobbyists persuade legislators to give their buddies our taxpayer money. That's what it boils down to. You know, they just take that money because they got it at their beck and call, and they redistribute it to their cronies. Crony capitalism. They don't earn it. They haven't provided us a service or a product. They take our tax dollars and sprinkle it over those individuals. They want then to provide them campaign contributions. That's how it works. And that's why we sent President Trump to Washington, to stop that nonsense.
Michelle?
I like Chris's in there. I think that having people in office that remind us of business owners are what true America is about. So I think you're right, Chris. I would like to say that sending tax dollars to give to established businesses has been going on for a long time, and I think that's why our budget slowly increases year by year by year by year. And if we're talking about lobbyists paying or contributing to campaigns for candidates, I would like to, just since he brought it up, I don't believe in established PACs. I don't believe that you can have a PAC, create a PAC, so that your industry that you work in can fund you tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that you can make your way back to Tallahassee by sending out a bunch of mailers to entice voters on uninformed information.
Okay, I
I
appreciate
think you're talking about my opponent.
Okay, so now this is interesting because Michelle just brought up the subject of political action committees or political committees and electioneering communications organizations. So we do have a question about that. So, and the question is, we want you to explain for us, for everybody in the room this evening, how campaigns are financed. Okay, because there's a couple of different ways that this happens. Some of it's very well known, some of it's not very well known. So we want you to tell us how campaigns are financed in Florida and what reforms, if any, you would like to see to the statutes that govern campaign finance in the state of Florida. Michelle will be up first.
I just need to clarify, am I Alex or Michelle right now? Because you handed me that microphone really fast. Well, I think it's interesting that the person that's never ran for office before gets to answer that question first, and I can enlighten you. I only get a minute, but I can give you a brief piece of what I've experienced. When I first said I was going to file to run for office, a lot of people said to me, "You are not the chosen one. You are not picked. You have not been groomed. It will not work." And I didn't understand that. I couldn't figure out that concept. What does that mean? Well, what that means is a lot of large business owners, or if you serve a specific industry, building or whatever, those people will pick you and say, "Oh, I want you to run for office. You'd be great at this." So then they start grooming you on ideas that they want you to implement when you get in office. And then they start funding your campaign. Well, I didn't have that. I have almost 500 campaign contributions to me personally, and the average contribution is $200, and 90% of them are from regular voters in District 1. So I funded it the old-fashioned way. We could ask Mike, he has a PAC. How does that work?
Well, let's go to Chris first.
It's interesting you mentioned that word grooming, because that's exactly what they do. My opponent has probably collected over $200,000, most of it from PACs in Tallahassee and South Florida. He alleges that I'm somehow supported by Stop Trump PACs and fabrications that he's made up in his mind. But in the big scheme of things, most of his supporters tend to be never Trumpers, to include individuals like Levin Papantonio and the individuals in the law firms here in town. So he's collected that. Of course, my previous opponent has funded his campaign to the tune of $50,000 to $100,000. That's Matt Gaetz, because he doesn't like me. Last I checked. But as far as grooming is concerned, I know how to dress myself. I know how to brush my teeth. I know how to comb my hair. What I can tell you is that I'm not going to be groomed, just like President Trump. I'm not going to be groomed, and I'm playing to anybody's tune but my own and yours. Thank you.
Mike?
Would you repeat the question?
The question is, explain for the people in the room this evening how campaigns are financed in Florida, okay, and what reforms, if any, would you like to see that the statutes that govern the process?
Currently, campaigns are financed two ways. One is is with what is called hard money. That's money where individuals, businesses, or whoever can give you a campaign contribution. The maximum limit is $1,000. The other way is called soft money, and that's through a political committee. It's called political committee at the state level. It's a political action committee at the congressional level. So on the political committee side, there is no limitation on how much money they can put into that PAC. That PAC is not allowed to coordinate with the candidate, him or herself. And they cannot send out any literature that says vote for this candidate, okay? So these are those who want to make sure that their candidate is going to get elected beyond just what the contributions that are made there. So if it were up to me, I would get rid of the PACs altogether and the PCs, because they know how to get around the rules. You think you have your PC here, what they will do is a PC over here will give it to another PC, which will give it to this one, which will eventually get to you, and it's so hard to even track where the money came from. I think what they ought to do is just get rid of PCs altogether.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I have a follow-up to Representative Mike Hill. And I know the answer, but I'd like for you to tell the audience, are you a chair of a political action committee? Who has funded that political action committee? And have mailers went out from that political action committee in this candidacy race?
No, I am not the chair of a PC political committee. I do have a political committee, and I'm the lead, what they call, I think it's administrator or whatever the title is. My name is on there. And the money that has come there has come from the State Farm insurance agent. I am a State Farm agent, have been for 30 years. Money has come from there. It has come from, but there's like 3 different sources where it has been coming from. And these are people who want to make sure that I am in office. Now, this much I will say. I was not funded by the establishment, either here in Pensacola or over in Tallahassee. I have been funded by those who want to make sure that I do not go over and do exactly what they want me to do, but instead I remain true to my oath of office and the assignment that was placed before me.
Okay, so Chris, do you have a follow-up? Okay, want to ask a further question? You're gonna have to wait until you get your opportunity.
Yeah, I don't have any further questions. I just have a copy of him being the chairperson of the
That's
PAC.
okay, that's okay. So, let's move on. Next question. We've already heard references to Enterprise Florida, and also to, Visit Florida. There's another big major trust fund that's out there called the Florida Forever Trust Fund. And this is where a lot of money gets spent on the purchase of property all over the state of Florida for supposedly environmental reasons. I'd like you to tell us, if you can, how many acres are already owned for conservation purposes by the state of Florida? All right, and do you think at some point enough is enough? And what kind of reforms would you like to see to these trust funds that purchase property all over the state for whatever reasons? And I think Mike's up first this time.
That trust fund was actually established a number of years ago, I think a decade or so ago easily. And there was a constitutional amendment that was passed, I think in 2016, I think it was 2016, which said that a portion of the dock stamps, that's when you purchase or sell a home, was to go into this fund, and that fund was to be used to purchase property around the state for the purpose of conservation. Right now, a third of the total state of Florida is owned by the state, either the state or federal government, a third of it. And what we did as a legislative body, we had to abide by the law. The law said was to use that money to go into that fund. We said instead of buying more land, better manage the land that you have there now. Try to spend money on improving that land. If it were up to me, we would sell it back into the private market and then allow it to become a lot more productive.
My answer's gonna be really brief. I don't believe the government should own all that land. I don't believe in eminent domain. I'm a real just old-fashioned country gal. That's my property. My dad always, when we talk about where we're going back to the property. You know, it's ours. It's ours. We pay those taxes, which we pay too many, and that's our land. So I don't believe that they should have a third. I don't believe that they should have a majority of it. I do understand a little bit about why, but there are so much more reasons why we should, you know, as individuals have that.
Are we talking, what, 5 million acres? What's the number? This is like Chris's, right? What do we got?
The question that I'm asking you guys, you tell us what percentage of the state of Florida is on, how many acres or what percentage is on.
Right, well, you already give us the answer, right? A third of it. So how many acres is that? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, you're right, it's roughly a third.
Okay.
I'm right.
Yeah, but as far as,
You know, I knew when I was running for governor, but the numbers escaped.
okay. Well, I'm a
It's a
big,
bunch.
yeah, well, I'm a big property rights owner, guy, and in a sense that, you know, my father's family's property was taken from him in Bulgaria. All right, and they didn't have a whole lot. We're talking, they called it hectares. So 1 hectare is about 2.5, acres of land. And they may have had a hectare, right, just to be able to subsist and live. And the Bulgarian government, the communist government, took it all away from them. And not till 50, 60 years later when they provided that land back. In fact, I still have a little piece of land in Bulgaria that has been, and I have as an heir. So I'm a big supporter of property rights, in that the state should not be accumulating land just for the sake of accumulation. It should be provided to those individuals that will have the best opportunity to work that land, make something of it. I would imagine, we're talking about the swamps in Okeechobee, but other places, like in Northwest Florida, there's very little land that I think that isn't usable and that could be better utilized by private enterprise.
Okay, anybody want the next 30 seconds? Okay, so we'll move on. We're going to move into an issue now that I think is going to be of great significance for virtually everybody in this room this evening, and that's our Second Amendment rights. Rights to own and bear firearms under both the federal and state constitution. People need to understand that we have a federal constitution and we have a state constitution, and both of those documents have certain regulations in them, or they make certain references to the right to own a firearm. So the question becomes, what is your position generally on the right of an individual to own and carry a firearm, and what is your position specifically on what is commonly referred to as the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill, the infringements contained in that bill, the massive amounts of money that were being spent under the auspices of that bill? What's your position generally, and what's your position specifically on that particular bill? I think Michelle's up first this time.
One of my favorite subjects. Interesting enough, I carry this phone with me, and I have inside here just a couple of things. One is a driver's license and of course, a business card, and then another is my concealed carry permit. So I am passionate about that. I grew up a lifetime family member of the Escambia River Gun Club, and my daddy always used to take me shooting. So I am just a firm believer that the Constitution is the Constitution, the United States Constitution, not Florida Constitution, and the fact that our Second Amendment rights are very clear. It is a right to keep and bear arms. There is no stipulation on that right. There should be no magazine capacity conversation. I always, when people ask me that, I say, just imagine a Bradley in the front of your yard with a 50 cal mounted. Like, I don't even care. It's your right. It's your right. And I don't agree with any infringement on that right. I do want to talk about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill just briefly, because you mentioned the money, and I can tell you I agree with that. I personally have seen how that money is used locally and how the bidding of contracts work for friends and family of the district, and I think that it is a huge misuse of funds.
Chris,
the Constitution of the United States guarantees that Second Amendment right, the God-given right, to keep and bear arms. No state has the right to supersede that fundamental right, period. And I think that anybody that would think that they can infringe just because of some tragedy in a particular state is off base, and that we should be rescinding the measures that have been put in place most recently. Unfortunately, by with the last remaining vote from Doug Roxon, our senator here, I think those things will be reversed, and we shouldn't have those infringements on anybody's right to keep and bear arms in the state of Florida. I think that in addition to that, with regards to security in these places, I think people would be much more secure if people were comfortable carrying arms, and people in our community recognize the fact that you're walking in a place where people are going to be committed to their own personal safety. And it makes people a lot more nervous, as they should be, if they're looking to commit some form of violence or theft.
First, I would say, read my lapel pin. I put action where it needs to be. Shortly after that Parkland bill was passed, I filed legislation to repeal the 4 unconstitutional parts of that. Number one, an 18 to 20-year-old couldn't purchase a long gun, that you had a 3-day waiting period once you purchased, that you couldn't buy or sell a bump stock in Florida, and the most egregious is the red flag laws, which says just based on an accusation, you can have your weapon and ammunition taken away from you, and then you have to hire legal counsel to get it back. Flipped our Constitution on its head. Because I said that solemn oath to support, protect, and defend it, I filed legislation to repeal that, even though leadership said that's our bill. I said, I fear God more than I do man. And I promised God I would do that, and so I did. I also co-sponsored constitutional carry bill. I was one of the few Republicans and representatives in the House who did that, and I also sponsored campus carry. I also sponsored a bill that would say that, co-sponsored a bill that said that if you have a preschool or a school on your church campus, you can still carry a weapon. Right now, you can't do that in Florida. If there is a school on the church property, you're not allowed to conceal carry in that church. So I co-sponsored legislation to repeal that. It moved, but it was blocked by some liberals over in the Senate. And I'll finish by saying this. Shortly after that Parkland shooting, there's a very liberal senator, Gary Farmer, a Democrat, who said, let's hold a rally in Tallahassee, tell them to hear the bills. There were 4 bills that he sponsored. All of them were for gun control. Michelle Salzman retweeted out, come to the rally. That rally was sponsored by the League of Women Voters. It was sponsored by the Florida PTA. It was sponsored by the Equality Florida. And it was sponsored by another very left-leaning group. And Michelle Salzman retweeted out Senator Farmer's bill saying, come to the rally, let's have gun control. That's a fact.
Michelle, you get an opportunity to respond. 30 seconds.
Completely taken out of context. I've never supported that bill.
Chris, you get 30 seconds.
Great. I would like to bring to everyone's attention, here we are with our own legislators determining how it is that they're going to limit our gun rights in the state of Florida. And I concur with Mike, everything needs to be reversed. But nonetheless, how is it that a foreign national shows up here from Saudi Arabia with a hunting license and buys a pistol? Who the heck goes hunting with a pistol, all right? And he kills 3 of our brave sailors on that base. I call for not only those laws to be repealed so that no foreign national can buy a weapon, but I also wrote into the paper, into the P&J, that all those Saudis on that base should be sent back home, and we should not be training those individuals here until they get things figured out.
Okay, so, and this is something that we had somebody out in the audience wrote a question down that had to do with this very issue. I'm not sure who it was, but it's me. Okay, I want to just thank you for your question, and I want to pose this to these 3 candidates in the same way in which you wrote it, because he started out his question by saying, passed by a Republican-controlled House and Senate and signed into law by a Republican governor in 2018, this bill, this Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill, deprives the citizens of Florida of their Second and Sixth Constitutional Amendment rights. 4,000 citizens have already been victims of this unconstitutional law. That would be the red flag portion of the statute that Mike referenced earlier. If elected, would you solemnly swear to draft, introduce, sponsor, support, and work to pass a bill to repeal this law? I think Mike's already told us that he would, even if the leadership in the Florida House and the governor oppose this bill. Now, we already know that they'll oppose the bill. We already know that. The Republican Speaker of the Florida House will oppose a bill like that. The Republican President of the Florida Senate will oppose a bill like that. And the governor would not sign it even if it was supported. My question is this: what has happened to the Republican Party, in your opinion, that our leadership in Tallahassee is willing to even allow a bill like that to have been passed in the first place, and is not willing to stand up and work now to repeal these provisions? It was passed in a panic, an absolute panic, a matter of like 2 weeks that bill got passed. So I've kind of lost track of who's up first. I think it's either Chris or Mike, I'm not sure. Chris, go ahead.
Simple answer. They're not Republicans and they're not conservatives. Okay? So they'll do whatever it is they want to say and get elected because they happen to want to be part of the team that's in charge, so they can figure out ways to get money back home to their cronies. Okay? But in the big scheme of things, they're not conservative and they're not Republicans. In fact, my opponent was shipped up here from South Florida, okay? And what does he do? He doesn't work with his colleague that's in the office with him, his legislative colleague. No. He disrupts and does everything he can to eviscerate and humiliate his colleague. And what message are you sending to Tallahassee? Boys, I will do whatever I can to maintain my office. Just give me money, and I will be your representative, but not the representative of House District 2, which I intend to be.
I think I answered that question previously when I said that I filed legislation to repeal. That law was passed in 2018.
Yes.
I got elected in 2018. In 2019, I filed legislation to repeal it. I filed it again in this year, 2020, and both times I was told, Mike, leadership won't like that. And I said, that's beside the point. What I have to do is stay true to my oath of office. I have to stand firm with the Second Amendment, our Constitution, and I filed that legislation to repeal it. Guess what I'm going to do next session?
You're going to file that legislation.
I'm going to file it again. I'm going to file it again. I'm going to keep filing it until we get it done. But like Chris said, we have those who pretend to be conservatives, pretend to be Republicans, but yet they're taking $500,000 from gun control Michael Bloomberg. That's the problem.
That's the problem. Michelle, you're up.
Just use an example. I was at the Republican Executive Committee debate a couple days ago. I was by myself, but I was there, and one of the questions was, how pro-life are you? And I know this isn't the question, but it's the same conversation. When somebody says they're Republican, when somebody says they're pro-life or pro-Second Amendment, it's a shame we even have to have this type of conversation. But it's true, there's such a, like what does that even mean? And I think that just in conversations that I've had with the House leadership and other representatives across the state in my year of running for office, I've learned that that has different meaning. And so it's important that we get back to true conservatism. It's important that we understand what that means to be a true Republican, to be a true conservative. But it's just like that. It's like how Republican are you? And I think that's the problem.
30 second follow-up. 30 seconds.
The question was, would you file or support legislation to repeal it?
I'm so grateful for you, Mike. Yes, I would support it.
Chris, 30 seconds.
I would support it. I'd co-sponsor it without hesitation. Because Mike, and we would have, and I know other people, if they were elected in the Panhandle, we would make a change in Tallahassee because we would be there as a united front protecting gun rights of the people in the Panhandle and the whole state of Florida.
Okay, next question. Education, another big issue, another constitutionally required under the Florida Constitution. The state government is put in a position of authority when it comes to public education in the state of Florida. What would your position be on school choice, the federal government's involvement in education, term limits for school board members, and anything else you'd like to add? And you're first.
First of all, school choice completely for it. The parents should be able to choose whichever method they think is best for their child, whether that's homeschool, private school, charter school, public school, internet learning school. The more competition you have against our government-run schools, the better they will perform because they will be forced to. The dollars should follow the child, not going to the school district. It should go the child and allow the parents to choose where they want to go. Should be no federal dollars at all, because that's against, they have no constitutional authority
Amen.
to get involved in state education.
Amen.
There was another part of that I wanted to make sure.
School board limit.
School board limits, yes. I wanted to co-sponsor legislation that would limit the school boards to 8 years. Every other elected office in Florida has 8 years. You said, why not the school board? But it wasn't even given a committee hearing. Was there one more part?
Anything else that you wanted to add?
Tell us.
Time's up, so
You're good.
you blew your sentence.
I agree with school choice. I think that we are fortunate in Escambia County to have access to academies all across the district, so we can practice school choice a lot easier than most school districts in the state of Florida. I think it's imperative that families are able to choose where they send their child, whether it be public, private, charter, homeschool, or Florida virtual school. And the dollars do follow the child. In Escambia County, at least they do. So when a child goes to charter school, the dollar goes to charter school. The private school, the dollar goes to the private school if it's approved. There are only a certain list. I think that the problem with education is not the funding of schooling or public or whatever. I think the problem with education is the family values that are lost now. So it's very important that a family that has a certain value can send their child to a school that matches their values. So I think that we certainly should always honor that. I don't agree with federal dollars. I do agree with term limits on school board members. We currently have a couple that have been there for a long time. So I would like to see that.
Chris, you're on.
This is a very, very complicated and convoluted issue. When you take a look at what's happening in the Escambia school system and its ranking within the state, it's a mess. You know, we don't have a whole lot to be proud of. And so, what are the options? When you take a look at the nature of our communities, where in some cases 70% of the homes don't even have fathers in them. You know, how do you expect to have children show up to school and be disciplined enough to be able to study? We spend more time feeding children than we do teaching children. That's a reality. You know, we're giving them breakfast, lunch, and dinner now. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, all we got to do is set up cots, and they're going to be living in these institutions. You know, but this is a problem. And so fundamentally, how do you fix that problem? By competition. As more and more people start sending their children to private schools, particularly Christian-based schools, these folks are going to do they're going to have to do one of two things, and the legislature is going to have to do one of two things. You're either going to support real education, and you're going to shut down those places that are really not educating children.
Okay, Mike, you get 30 seconds, an additional 30 seconds if you want. Michelle, that's your 30.
I'm sorry, I come from a very big background in public education, and I actually, my kids went to Pensacola Christian for a while, but I just want to say that we have incredible educators here in Escambia County. This is not a lack of heart and love. We have incredible leadership in Escambia County. This is a,
Common core.
well, that
Common Core.
I- That's fine. We're gonna have to agree to disagree. We have a great education, or we have great educators and we have great teachers here. The teachers and the educators are not the problem. It's the homes. It's where the children come from before they get to school. That's the problem.
Okay, Chris?
It's sort of like law enforcement in the sense that the reason the sheriff's office would not shut down that abortion clinic was because they knew that they weren't gonna get the backup from the governor's office. And it's the same thing with educators. I mean, you can't discipline these children, you have no control over these children, and at the same time, you're supposed to provide a product, an educated child. It's next to impossible. And so, and why? Because the state and the local area community don't back up the educators. And so things run rampant in these schools. And we have to recalibrate our educational system. And it's gonna be painful, but that's how it's gotta be done.
Okay, I'm gonna invoke my power, authority, if you will, to ask a follow-up question. And this is not to all three of the candidates, but it is a follow-up question to just one of the candidates. Michelle, you said in your initial response that the money does follow the student. I would suggest to you that that is flat out not correct, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to explain to us why you think it is that the money follows the student.
If I'm a public school child and I'm in a school that is failing, or a school that is considered to be failing, I can utilize school choice option. I go to the school district and I file the paperwork. If my child goes to a charter school, the money follows the child.
But that's public education.
There
If
are
your
some,
child wants to, if you want to send your child to a private
there are
school,
some private schools that are on the list. My son has a 504.
there are
Mhm.
there are scholarship programs. There's the Gardner Scholarship, and there are
Yes.
other scholarship
That's
programs.
correct.
But not everybody that sends their
That's
child
right.
to a private school does the per pupil funding follow that child to a private school.
And
And I think that that was the issue that was raised when we talk about the money following the child, is should the money be able to be sent, follow the child to a private school, whether they're on a Gardner Scholarship or any other scholarship? Should that FFE, that full funding equivalent, be allowed to follow that student into a private school just because that's where the parents think he or she will get the best education?
Sure. Short answer, yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Clarify.
sure.
Where does the money go for homeschoolers?
They don't get the money.
That's right.
So that's, no,
That's in the schools, so it
It
don't.
goes to the public education system. That's the
So
whole
they don't
point.
follow the
And
school.
that's the whole point in the school choice movement that's blowing up all over the state right now and all over the country.
Can I
The
follow?
money following the student regardless of where the parents believe the student should be going.
And that is also true with Florida virtual school. If a child enrolls in Florida virtual school, which is different than virtual school, the money doesn't go back to the district either. It's very convoluted.
It
It
is.
is, and it does need to be fixed. Trust me, I would love to fix that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned homeschoolers. There are certain programs, certain scholarships, and certain other programs that public school students are eligible for when they're matriculating out of the public school system and into the state university systems, and those programs aren't available to homeschoolers. So there are some serious inequities there. Mike, you got to follow up?
Yes, please. When Michelle Salzman was chairman of the Escambia PTA, and was a member of the Florida PTA, everyone knows the PTA is not for school choice. That they want to send all the children to public schools. You were a part of that system for many years, so, and at that time, you were staunchly supporting no school choice, public school only. There's no way you could have been leadership without that.
You can just follow up since you were called out by Andrew.
Thank you. I think this is an example of why I would be an effective leader in Tallahassee and Mike wouldn't, because I can be on a team and not agree. We have 2 charter schools specifically that I fostered during my time as president of the County Council PTA that I made sure were taken care of and got extra special attention because of the state's position. The state PTA does not tell the local county council PTA what they must and must not adopt, and the county council PTA does not tell the local units what they must and must not adopt. That is not how the charter works.
Charter school is a
Mike
public
was,
school.
Mike was.
We have
called-
charter schools in our, we have
Hang on,
PTAs
hang
for
on,
charter
hang on,
schools.
I'm gonna have to break up my gavel here in just a minute. Okay, so now Mike was called out by name, so Mike gets an opportunity to respond, and that'll be it, we're gonna go on to the next
I'll
question.
make it real brief. Charter schools are public schools.
That's right.
So it was easy for the PTA to say we support this charter school.
Right.
But they do not support private Christian schools. They do not support homeschooling. And that was a position of the PTA at the local level and at the state level.
Okay, we're gonna combine two questions together because they have to do with the voting process. What's your position on voter ID, photo ID, confirmation of voters being required? And there's a lot of controversy right now going on over mail-in voting. And so give us your positions on mail-in voting, voter ID, photo ID requirements, all of those kinds of things. And who's up first? I think Michelle's up first. Well, or Chris, maybe, I'm not sure.
My first part of that question was, what is my take on ID? I think you should have a valid state ID when you vote, whatever that may be, issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles. I think that I personally vote in person all the time. I've never mailed a ballot before, but I just don't trust, especially right now with the Postal Service being so far behind. I mean, if you're a candidate right now, you know that if you don't get your mailer in the mail by Wednesday, it's not guaranteed to get to the voter by 2 weeks later. So I can only imagine what that will do with the mail-in ballots. So I question that process.
Chris?
No ID, no vote.
Amen.
I'm old school. If it were up to me, everybody would be going to go down to the polls on election day and voting. And if you're military overseas, you have the opportunity to have an absentee ballot. This whole effort to make it as accommodating as it can to everybody and his brother has not increased voter participation by any stretch of the imagination. All it's really done is made it more difficult for people to challenge incumbents. That's all it's done, is extracted over a longer period of time what it requires in monies to fund a campaign guaranteeing incumbents their office. That's what it's done. That's the truth.
Mike?
Well, being an incumbent.
You're Mike.
No, I agree with you, Chris, 100%. And what was the question?
Voter ID,
Oh, voter
photo
ID.
ID,
Yeah.
and vote by mail.
That's right. Yeah, of course, you should have an ID to be able to vote. I agree with Chris, it should be voting day, none of this early voting nonsense. The only ones who should have absentee ballots, I believe, are the military, who are stationed elsewhere, but their residence is here, or those who are in assisted living facilities and are unable physically to come down and vote. They should also be able to get absentee ballots. All others, I think you should have to go on voting day. The vote by mail, no, we should stop that nonsense, except for those occasions. I sponsored a bill this last session to stop what is called ballot harvesting. That's where one person can go and gather a bunch of ballots, take it down to the supervisor of elections office, and for some reason, they always vote Democrat when they start counting those boxes. I sponsored legislation to do that. The Republican Party of Florida killed it.
Anybody want their 30 seconds? Looks like we've about covered that issue. Okay, one final question from me, and then we'll give you guys a chance to ask each other a question. You're all running for the Florida House. And in the Florida House, there's a rule that says that you only get 6 bill slots. File as many repealers as you want to, but as far as new legislation goes, you only get 6. That's the max. So what will your priorities be, your legislative priorities be? How will you fill your 6 bill slots that you're allowed under House rules? I think Chris is up first.
My priorities in legislation, and again, as I told you earlier, I don't have huge ambitions to just pass laws for the sake of passing laws, okay, would be getting people back to work, to remove any regulation that is causing small businesses not to be able to operate, that's hamstringing their abilities to make a profit, getting our children back to school safely from K to 12th grade. The university system, if we got to draw money out of some educational component of our community, it needs to be drawn out of there and put into K through 12. And then, of course, legislation that will preserve our monuments and our history and our culture. This is nonsense, this cancel culture and removing those things that are deep and dear to our hearts as Americans. We got to stop doing that. We got to maintain law and order, make sure that our police forces are properly funded, because that affects the poor. Violence and crime affects the poor much more than it does the rich. So that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Mike?
When you go to Tallahassee, you don't always get your bills passed the first time. That's just a fact. There were over 3,000 bills that were filed this past session. Usually that's about the amount. And this past session, over 200 of them were passed. And I think about 152 million. Because every time you see those bills that are being passed, it means more restrictions, something on your life. My priority is going to be number one, the heartbeat bill. I'm bringing that back again. I'm going to bring back the bill to repeal that unconstitutional Parkland shooting bill. I'm going to bring back the bill again to protect our Confederate monuments. I'm going to bring back the bill again to establish rural economic development. I'm going to bring it back again to stop ballot harvesting. And number 6, I'm going to bring the bill back again to stop the state of Florida investing in communist China.
My priorities are safety, infrastructure, and education. Those are my priorities. I have spent the past year talking to constituents all over the district, because I've never ran before, so a lot of people have never met me, asking them what their concerns are. And it turns out their concerns are the same: public safety, firefighters, infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, and of course, education. I also have said that I'm not promising to write any specific bill until I get there. I have also created a question and answer portion on my website where anybody in District 1, we do verify your address, can tell us what you think your priorities are. Where do you want to see bills go? Where do you want to see money go? And I'd like to have public forums and talk to the community. I call myself the people's conservative because I really want to represent the people. Of course, we want to maintain our safety, our infrastructure, and our education.
Okay. We have reached that point.
30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I wasn't paying close enough attention to the question, but a bill that would be first priority would be co-sponsoring the heartbeat bill. These folks need to wake up in Tallahassee and recognize that without life, the other pursuits are meaningless. And we need to make sure that as a culture, we start to teach people in a way through our own initiatives that life is paramount. Thank you.
Anybody else want 30 seconds? Okay, we've reached that point now where the candidates get to ask their opponent a question of their choosing. And of course, we're going to let Chris go first because his opponent isn't here. So that means that Chris gets to ask the question and then he gets to answer it. So that's what happens when you don't show up for one of these forums. You need to show up. So Chris, ask your question and then answer it on behalf of your opponent.
Let me preface my question by saying that anyone that would destroy the good name and reputation of an individual is absolutely incapable of defending the Constitution of the United States. That's what it boils down to. So my question to my opponent: if you've done such a great job and we should be re-electing you, then why is it that you spent the last 40 days eviscerating my character and spreading lies about me, telling people that I was supported by a Trump PAC, stop Trump PAC that never existed? I was funded and endorsed by a company or a group that never existed. Why would you do that, young man? Can I respond? I'm sorry, sir, but I got nothing else to run on. The only thing I can do is attack you, and because Nathan said that's what I got to do to win.
He wouldn't call you sir.
You do not want to not show up. All right, ladies first. Michelle, you get to ask your question of Mike. You get 30 to 40 seconds to ask it. Mike gets a minute to respond. And then you actually get to challenge and follow up and ask for clarification. What's your question of Mike?
I made a note on my phone and I took a picture so I didn't lose it. Your record for last year was 0 for 9 bills. In fact, you've not been successful in any year. You have openly admitted you didn't go to Tallahassee asking to bring any money back for your district. What do you say to the people of District 1 who have placed their trust in you to fight for them?
First of all, let me correct you. I have passed several bills since I've been in Tallahassee. Number one, it's in place right now that says that if an abortionist is going to perform that surgical procedure of an abortion, they must have admitting privileges or a transfer agreement in a nearby hospital. That was my bill. It passed. It is currently law right now. Another one of my bills that I've passed, as I stated, was to Andy's Law. Andy's Law is the anti-terrorism law. It says if you are a victim of a terrorist attack, then you can bring civil penalties against the person who perpetrated the attack and collect treble damages from them and those who funded that attack. That's my bill. It's in law right now. There was legislation, as I say, sponsoring or co-sponsoring the parental consent bill. The parental consent bill says that if a minor under the age of 18 is going to have an abortion, they must have a parent's consent. You would think that would be common sense, but we had to pass a law to do that here in Florida.
Okay, I meant bills that you wrote, not bills that everybody else wrote and that you just voted on.
No, the first two I wrote.
What year were those written? Because you've been the representative 2018, what year were those? I'm just gonna.
No, I was first elected in 2013.
Oh, so as a representative of District 1, what have you, I'm sorry, I did not, let me rephrase that. As a representative of District 1, what bills have you passed for District 1 that you wrote? What did you bring back to District 1?
Okay. One was naming the bridge, the Chappie James Bridge.
That bill did not pass.
Yes, it did.
That wasn't your bill.
Yes, it was.
Okay,
There was that.
let's research this, guys.
Naming the bridge, the General Chappie James Bridge, was my bill in the House.
That died.
Does-
Okay,
No, it didn't die.
Ask the question, give him a chance to answer.
You're right, I'm sorry, he's
No,
right.
it didn't die. It passed 2 committees unanimously, and then it went to its 3rd committee stop where I was all ready to present it. But what happened was there's a process that instead of debating and voting on every single bill that is naming some bridge, street, or whatever, because there are a bunch of them, what they do is they grab them all and put them together, put it a part of the transportation package, and they're all voted on at one time. That's what happened to my bill when it hit its 3rd committee stop, that instead of allowing me the privilege of my bill of moving it onto what they call that train, it was taken from me by Alex Andretti, and he did it instead. But it was my bill that I originally wrote. That's just one example. Now, of my other bills, you tell me why they didn't move. Why didn't the heartbeat bill move? Why didn't repeal of the unconstitutional ban on our guns? Why didn't that move? You tell me why stopping ballot harvesting didn't move. So the fact is that not everybody can get things done what they want to when they go to Tallahassee, including our speaker, who doesn't get everything that he wants. It's a process. You have to keep working and be diligent and consistent and make sure you go back and do it again. And I promise you that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, Mike, you now get an opportunity to ask Michelle a question of your choosing.
Okay? I know you say that you are against abortion, that you're pro-life. I'd like to ask you this question. Do you think that a woman has a constitutional right to choose to have an abortion if she wants to? Say it a little louder.
No, no.
Okay, Mike, you get to challenge that or follow that up if you want. Okay, we have reached that point in the I think we've been at this for a while. Okay, probably it's time to go ahead and give the candidates a 1-minute closing statement. And then we'll wrap things up after that. Now, we started this way and that way with our opening statements, so we'll start down on the end with Mike. Mike will take his 1-minute closing statement and then we'll come right down the line.
You know what you're gonna get when you send me to Tallahassee. I did exactly what I said I was going to do when you elected me in 2018. I promised you I was gonna file the heartbeat bill, and I did. I promised you I was gonna file a bill to repeal the unconstitutional red flag laws, and I did. You don't have to wonder when an issue comes before me, how is Mike Hill gonna vote on this? Is leadership gonna get to him? Is some lobbyist gonna get to him? How's he going? You know exactly how I'm going to vote because I've proven that. Limited government, low taxes, personal freedom, and individual responsibility. That is exactly how I'm going to vote every time. I've proven that. Even if it means that it makes me unpopular in Tallahassee. I didn't go to join the swamp. I came to keep your money back here to drain that swamp. I'm not going to go over just to play nice with those who think I should play nice. No, I'm going over there to represent you. You know exactly how I'm going to vote. We don't need, at this time right now, with all that's going on in this country and in this state, we don't need to try and change and then have someone you have to guess how they might vote on certain issues, who had to hesitate for I don't know how many seconds and geek out about abortion. Thank you.
This time I'll stand. Gotta stretch your legs a little bit here.
First and foremost, just like the folks didn't want Donald Trump to go to Washington, I don't know if I could get any more people in Tallahassee not wanting me to be there. All the more reason why you should send me there. Okay? All the more reason. Because they don't want me there. And you gotta wonder why. I got more done not being in the legislature by getting that bridge named after General James than most of those knuckleheads get done in 8 terms or 4 terms that they're there. They get less done than what we were able to do and accomplish with the help of the veterans and the communities in naming that bridge. But let me bring this to your attention. We all know what this is. U.S. Constitution. Please, if you got one, if you got 10 of them, pick up another one to pass on to somebody when you leave here, okay? But this, it illustrates, it enumerates our rights, but it does more than that. What does it really do? This is a definition of 5,000 years of civilization. This preserves your dignity. This is what this document does. It guarantees the dignity of every man and woman in this country. And I will serve you honorably in Tallahassee as your representative because I will protect your dignity. The dignity that God gave you when He provided you life. I hope that I gained your vote. Please tell your friends. Let them know the reason you need to send me to Tallahassee is because everybody in Tallahassee wants to make sure I don't go there. Thank you.
Michelle, you're up. 1 minute.
Thank you. I know that I came here tonight. I know what kind of audience I'm in. I know that Mike is endorsed by this organization. But I came here anyway because I wanted you guys to hear me tell you about me and me answer questions truthfully. I think it's interesting how people are so scared to be effective that they vote for the same thing over and over again and expect different results. The truth is, Mike is a great cheerleader for the cause, but he has brought nothing back to Pensacola. Nothing. Everything he has written has either sat on his desk or someone has stolen from him. You need somebody in Tallahassee that can get it done, not somebody that will just cheer for the cause. You need somebody that can work well with others, no matter the differences. I can sit at the table with anybody and have a conversation, and I can bring back results. Thank you.
All right, let's give all of these candidates a round of applause. Also thank Pastor Jim in the back corner and thanks to John Mills and Bill Fetke. And if anyone's interested, there's a group that's going to be gathering in Ruby Tuesday to talk about the Republican Liberty Caucus and the possibility of forming a local chapel here. Welcome to join us. Yes, sir?
I have two comments.
Sure.
One is the voter ID. Okay?
What is voter ID?
No. Comment. Shouldn't it be citizens only?
Of course.
Yeah.
Because some states issue ID, so you don't have to be a citizen.
You're correct.
Right.
You're correct.
The Constitution addresses citizens.
American citizens only.
Yes.